Hey everybody, I'm Howard, and this is Otter's Retirement Corner. So let's talk about Social Security COLAs. Now, I've been doing these videos for well over a year, and I've never broached the subject for some reason. So I think it's about time to do this. And mainly because there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of myths, a lot of stories, a lot of conspiracy theories floating around about COLAs. Again, I watch a lot of other videos. I read a lot of comments on YouTube, on Yahoo, whenever there's the subject of Social Security comes up. And, the COLA for next year was recently announced in October last month. And it was the same old comments over and over, and I guess it didn't impress me enough, but let's address it now. Before next year's COLA, I guess. So anyway, what's a COLA? It's a cost of living adjustment. So what happens is every year, everyone's, and not just by state, which is another misconception I read, for the entire country, everyone's Social Security benefit, and we're talking retirement benefits here, get increased by whatever percentage based upon what inflation is. And when I say what inflation is, the way they do it is they take the inflation rate for the third quarter of each year and compare it to the prior year. So August, September, October, I'm sorry, July, August, September, whatever the inflation rate is that period versus the prior year period. So when they did it this year, the inflation rate was 2.5%. And when we say inflation rate, as measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in their Consumer Price Index, and it's called CPI-U, and I don't want to get into weeds on this, but it's basically what they feel is the inflation for everybody. Now, of course, nobody ever believes if you read the comments on any article about Consumer Price Index, they always think for some reason it's being underestimated. Instead of food is 3% inflation, no, it's 10%, it's 20%. Everybody has their own inflation rate. Depending upon what you eat, depending upon what you spend your money on, your inflation rate's going to be different than your next door neighbor. What you hear people comment on is what we would call anecdotal evidence, and it's not even evidence. They've never measured how much they pay for food month after month after month. I actually went through this exercise for about a decade on like 30 items I bought as a regular routine. Unfortunately, as the years went by, some of those items went away, so it was hard to do an accurate count. But my inflation for my food was actually lower than what it was advertised for the entire country. Anyway, they use the CPI-U index, and there's another index that people are wanting them to use called CPI-E, which more accurately, supposedly, reflects what elderly or people 62 and older spend. Now, the difference between the two indexes is basically just the weighting of each category. They measure the same products at the same or services at the same stores or wherever you get these goods and services, and they just weight them differently. Elderly people spend more in healthcare than the normal population. So the reason they haven't instituted this yet is, number one, Congress hasn't decided to change it. But number two, they're just not really sure this one's even that accurate, because they don't believe people 62 and over actually spend their money at the same place as everybody else does, in the same way at the same time. So they're not sure of it. And sometimes the CPE is higher than the CPI-E versus the CPI-U. Sometimes it's lower. I think what we found over time is that either index, in most people's minds and experts, it's not accurately tracking inflation. And you can argue by how much, everybody's got their opinion again. So again, for this last year, they came up with a 2.5% increase. And had they used CPI-E, it would have been 3%. So let's imagine, and this is just a rough number here, let's say Average beneficiary right now gets about $1,900 a month. Let's say they receive it over 15 years. If this 0.5% difference was instituted, if every year it was a 0.5% higher on CPI-E versus CPI-U, the person on 2.5% increase would go from 1,900 a year. I'm sorry, 1,900 a month, and 15 years later they'd be getting 2,751 a month. If it was 3%, they'd be up to 2,960 a month. So, there's $209 a month after 15 years. It's not a huge amount of money. And the other complaint you hear from people is, well, with the COLA, we just can't get ahead. Now understand, the COLA is not designed for you to get ahead. The COLA is designed to keep you even with inflation. And again, everyone has different things they spend on. Some people will fall behind. Some people may come out ahead, depending upon what they spend on and what the weights of those spendings are. And I've talked about this before. If you have a mortgage, and that's a big part of your budget, mortgages don't change from year to year unless you have an ARM, but in general, for most people. So the largest part of their expenses go up zero, and their overall weighted cost of living increase is probably lower than what they're getting in Social Security. Again, it's going to vary for everybody. So there's certainly flaws in the system, and it's pretty obvious that the way it's done now, we don't keep up with inflation. But here's the other thing, and here are the misconceptions. Well, under President Biden, he didn't give us as much as we needed, or under President Trump, he didn't give us much as needed. Presidents don't decide. Administrations don't decide. The formula for the increases are preset, as I told you earlier. Whatever the CPI is for those 3 months, the third quarter of the year versus the prior year, it's done. Nobody says, okay, well, let's round it up, let's round it down, let's grant them more, let's grant them less, let's cut it out. There's no control. None of the administrations control it. All right, so if you want to mistrust what the CPI calculation is, that's fine. Make your case. If you have your own data set and you can prove they're wrong, fine. There's alternative data sets out there that say it's wrong. And again, it very well might be, but don't get paranoid about what's going on. The other comment I see a lot is, well, they lie about the CPI because they don't want to give us as big a COLA as we deserve. Well, who's they? Are you saying the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is gathering this data and then somehow cheating it and saying inflation is lower than it actually is so that you get a smaller COLA on your Social Security? Well, that's absurd, because why would the BLS care? Why would the government care? None of them are paying for your Social Security or your Social Security increase. That money comes from us. If we have to increase taxes to save the Social Security Trust Fund, it's going to come from us. Anything they do comes from us. The government doesn't fund Social Security. The BLS couldn't care less, unless the people working there are on Social Security. But obviously they'd round it up then. These paranoid conspiracy theories are out there, but trust me, there's nobody who cares. You think they're plotting, but they're really not. So is there a better way? Probably. Many people have many different opinions how to do those. What I want to keep you in mind, though, is if you're somebody who's only living on Social Security alone, you're getting hurt. If you're someone who has investments and savings, sometimes inflation helps you. My personal situation, and again, everyone's not me, I'm just saying for me, when inflation really rose, interest rates really rose. So the money I was making, especially on my cash and my bonds, and new bonds I was buying, that went up in a greater amount than my expenses increased due to inflation. I came out ahead. It's rare, I get that, but it's just to further my point that it's a different situation for everybody. But the more likely, the more that you have in savings and investments to hedge against inflation, especially stocks, the better you will come out. So, the other thing I hear is, oh, good, we got a high 8.7% cola, was 2 years ago. Yay, we want higher colas. You don't. Higher colas are bad because it means inflation was bad. And every year inflation is high, you lose a greater percentage if they're underestimating that inflation than if inflation was zero and you got a zero cola. So don't go cheering high colas, cheer low colas, because it means prices didn't go up as much. I know it's counterintuitive, off the top of your head, but that's just the way it is. So, what's the better way? You can look, over time, inflation somewhere 3.2, 3.3% a year. You say, okay, every year just add 4%. Every year add 4.5%, something like that. Or, does somebody have a better database that reflects, everybody's inflation? And, probably not. And before Congress does anything, someone would really have to prove that. And again, Congress has nothing to lose. It's not their money. They can change the COLA equation anytime they want. Just light a fire under them. So let me know what you think. Are colas good? Are colas bad? Are you happy with them? Are you angry with them? What would you do? What is your preference? So thanks for listening. Give me your comments, please. I'm very interested to hear this one. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time. Bye.